Bodhichitta, and then the foundation of all good qualities. Sangye Jeta Zoy Chanam La Chanchum Banda Tane Kya Such Tagi Jin Zoy Sanangye Rola Penche Sangye Trobara. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. The foundation of all good qualities is the kind and perfect Guru. Correctly following the Guru is the root of the path. By my clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely upon the Guru with great respect. So in this verse is a connection with something we're going to be looking at today. Should get round to today anyway. You see it says great effort in the third line, right? So I'm sure one has to apply great effort, but what Kyabji Rinpoche said in relation to this, because literally it says something that sounds a little bit strange, perhaps in English. It says several efforts or multiple efforts, many efforts. Vipaduma. So what Rinpoche said was, this means that, it's not enough just to make some effort just the one time and expect everything's going to work. Rather, you're going to have to make effort, and you're going to have to make effort again, you have to make effort again, and it takes a lot of effort. You have to keep something you have to keep doing. You have to persist with in order to have things really working the way you want them to. So that comes up today in this text that we're, this part of the text we're looking at. When I've discovered that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, it is extremely difficult to find again, and is greatly meaningful. Please bless me to unceasingly generate the mind, taking its essence day and night. This body and life are changing like a water bubble. Remember how quickly they perish and death comes. After death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow. When I have found definite conviction in this, please bless me always to be conscientious in abandoning even the slightest collection of shortcomings and in accomplishing all virtuous deeds. When I have recognized the shortcomings of samsaric perfections, there is no satisfaction in enjoying them. They are the door to all suffering, and they cannot be trusted. Please bless me to generate a strong wish for the bliss of liberation. Through my being led by this pure thought, with great remembrance, alertness, and conscientiousness, please bless me to make keeping the individual liberation vows through to the teachings my essential practice. Just as I have fallen into the sea of samsara, so have all mother transmigratory beings. By my seeing this, please bless me to train in supreme bodhicitta, which bears the responsibility of freeing transmigratory beings. Even if I develop only bodhicitta without familiarizing myself with the three types of morality, I cannot achieve enlightenment. By my seeing this well, please bless me to keep the vow of the sons of the victorious ones with fervent effort. By my having pacified distractions to wrong objects and correctly analyzed the meaning of reality, please bless me to quickly generate within my mind stream the unified path of calm abiding and special insight. When I become a suitable vessel by training in the common path, please bless me to immediately enter the holy gateway of the fortunate beings, the supreme of all vehicles, the Vajrayana. At that time, the base of accomplishing the two attainments is keeping my vows and samaya purely. When I have gained effortless conviction in this, please bless me to protect them even at the cost of my life. Then when I have realized exactly the vital points of the two stages, the essence of the tantric sets, and am enjoying the yoga of 4 sessions with effort without being distracted by non-meditation objects, please bless me to accomplish these according to the teachings of the holy beings. Thus may the virtuous friends who reveal the noble path and the spiritual practitioners who correctly accomplish it have long lives. Please bless me to pacify completely the collections of outer and inner obstacles. In all my lives, never separated from perfect gurus, may I enjoy the magnificent Dharma, and by completing the qualities of the grounds and paths, may I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. So if we spend a couple of minutes, try to get the best kind of, be in the best frame of mind for getting the most out of this time, this period, which means the bodhicitta attitude, the mind, which it mentions in what we've just been reciting, taking responsibility for all sentient beings, which means seeing their suffering, which they don't like, just like we don't like suffering. See that they want happiness but don't have happiness, just like we want happiness, and we don't also experience any real happiness. So not just being aware of that, but taking responsibility because of recognizing the kindness of the sentient beings, each one of them, kind in so many ways. To repay the kindness, we're going to liberate them from suffering, and we're going to lead them to perfect happiness of enlightenment. And to be able to do that, we ourselves have to achieve enlightenment. So thinking, in order to lead all sentient beings out of suffering into perfect enlightenment, I myself have to achieve enlightenment, and that's why I'm going to spend this time learning about the path that leads to such such a state or such a level of development, such a goal. In this teaching by Lama Tsongkhapa called the Middle Length, explanation of the stage of path to awakening or to enlightenment, we're looking at the part of his teaching that explains how to meditate on bodhicitta, or you should usually call to generate bodhicitta. Most people say that, you generate bodhicitta. It sort of means to produce, to grow bodhicitta in your mind. So we all have the seed of enlightenment, actually. We all have the seed of enlightenment, the potential for enlightenment, potential to become Buddhas. And so what gets you there is bodhicitta. If we have the potential to achieve enlightenment, that means, of course, we have the potential to achieve everything that gradually takes us there. And one of the main things is this attitude of bodhicitta. Really quite an amazing idea, really. What's amazing about it is, one thing is getting to have bodhicitta. Once you have bodhicitta, it means that you think, it means that you see that enlightenment is possible. And that's quite an amazing thing, actually, to actually believe it's possible. Not like somehow, well, they're Buddhists, and so, we know there's such thing as Buddhas and we have the potential, but could you imagine actually feeling like I could actually definitely do that? That's pretty amazing. And then there's the whole idea of taking responsibility for all sentient beings, recognize their kindness, like recognizing them as one's mother and so on. Thinking of kindness, all sentient beings as one's mother. Thinking how they have cared for us so much in so many past lives, even sacrificing their own lives for us. And then taking responsibility, because though they want happiness just like we do, they don't have happiness. They don't like suffering, just like we don't like suffering, but they have so much suffering. And they don't really know the way, just like we need a guide, they need a guide. So we can't really guide them at the moment, but if we achieve enlightenment, we will be able to guide them along the path like our teachers guide us. Maybe that's why there's this story I think I heard from some Western students who had gone to visit Guru Lama Rinpoche, Tenzin Gyaltsen. This is the one who, he was a guru of the Dalai Lama. Whose Holiness recognized as a Bodhisattva, an actual Bodhisattva. And he received the Shantideva teachings of the Bodhicharavatara from him, from Guru Lama Rinpoche. So the story is something like, anyway, there's these Western students wanted to make some offerings to him. And I probably haven't got the details right, but anyway, so he says, I don't need anything, I have bodhicitta. So it's like not only is a precious jewel. Okay, so anyway, it's just what you call it, a metaphor, isn't it? So it's like having a precious jewel, but it's just if you have that bodhicitta, I think it's like incredible power and inside, as well as like, I know, something quite blissful, I think, must be. Amazing, really. And anyway, yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, something, even, I think, even at, at a beginner level, when you're beginning to think about these things and it begins to sound like, yeah, that makes sense. Sort of gives your life meaning in a way that it never had before, I think. So it talks about, confidence and courage that, that you have when, if you have bodhicitta. Anyway, really amazing. So talks of, in here, Lao Tsong talks about the two main ways to generate bodhicitta, meditate on bodhicitta. So there's the one that we looked at already, which is called the 7-part cause and effect way to generate bodhicitta. And then equalizing, exchanging self and others, that's the other way that comes from Shantideva. I mean, ultimately comes from Buddha, but anyway, sort of comes through to us through Shantideva. And yeah, quite interesting. So one thing that Shantideva says in the Bodhisattva, which is Holiness Dalai Lama often mentions, which I think I mentioned like maybe last week. Yeah, there is one of the earlier verses in this chapter, a few pages ago. Because in this book we're on page 211. Yeah, 211 towards the bottom. So this verse that says, if you don't exchange self and others, then not only will enlightenment be impossible, but even you won't even experience any happiness in psychic existence. You remember that from last time? I think it was last time. So I always like the sound of that, I must say. Not quite sure why, but anyway, I always like the sound of that. However, it was a bit strange, really, because there are these two ways of meditating on bodhicitta. 7 cause and effect instruction, and then equalizing itself and others. And in the second way of meditating on bodhicitta, you've got exchanging self and others. That's where you have to exchange yourself and others. Not in the first way, right? We went through those 7. No talk of exchanging self and others, is there? Can you remember? Recognizing all sentient beings as one's mother, thinking about their kindness, then repaying the kindness, and the affectionate love or heartwarming love, great compassion, the special attitude, and then bodhicitta, those 7. But it seems like, according to Shantideva, there's no way you're going to achieve enlightenment unless you exchange self and others. So that means he's saying you can't achieve enlightenment by meditating on bodhicitta with the 7 cause and effect instruction, right? Is that what he's saying? Seems like that's what he's saying. So somehow that came up in I don't know if any of you listened to Geshe Ngandrapa teaching 7-point mind training, which is really quite amazing. His teaching is really quite amazing. So somehow somebody brought that verse up, and Geshe explained it completely differently. He said, "Oh, that's just what Shantideva was saying there was just in case you thought to yourself that exchanging self and others, exchanging self and others." What was I going to say? Exchanging self and others is just too difficult. And we already know a bit about what exchanging self and others is, right? But that was where we left off the last time. Like instead of, the kind of like all of the focus being on me and not really caring so much about others, switching that so the focus is on others without and not thinking so much about oneself. So it's just too difficult. It's too difficult. And nobody's saying it is easy. I mean, it's a switch of attitude where that attitude is something that we've had since, so like a habit that we've had since beginningless lifetimes. Always been doing that. So it's not easy. So I think if I have to exchange self and others in order to achieve enlightenment, I just won't bother. I'll just stay here in samsara. And so what Shantideva is saying is, okay, so I messed it up. But anyway, so what he's saying is, look, okay, so if you're going to give up exchange, the whole possibility of exchange yourself and others, then there's no way you're going to achieve enlightenment. Not only that, but you also won't find happiness in samsara, which means if you decide you're not going to bother about exchange yourself and others, so you won't achieve enlightenment, and you're going to just stay where you are, you think you're going to be happy? You think you're going to be happy? Keep going with the self-cherishing. You think you're going to be happy? You're not going to be happy. Just, selfishness doesn't get you anywhere. So that's what Shantideva was saying. He wasn't saying that everybody who wants to achieve enlightenment has to exchange self and others. That's what Geshe said. But still, something to think about. Because one thing is, you see, there are these two ways of meditating on bodhicitta, right? Usually they say for the dull faculty one, there's a 7 cause and effect instruction. And for the sharp faculty one, there's equalizing exchange yourself and others. Although what some might say should be the other way around, because meditating on bodhicitta by the 7 cause and effect instructions starts off with seeing all sentient beings as one as mothers. That's not easy. Much easier to start off by recognizing that all sentient beings are equal, right? The equality of self and others. See what I mean? You're not sure I mean, right? I'm not sure I know what I mean. So anyway, that's what they say. Okay, so there are these 2 ways. So do you think that that's it's either one or the other? There are these 2 ways. So is it just one or the other? Maybe we'll talk about that a bit later. Maybe it's a bit soon to be talking about this. Because there's also another way that combines them. And I heard from somebody, I can't remember who, whether it was a friend or one of my teachers. Generally speaking, people combine the 2. Anyway, sorry. I'm not sure that what I said made sense to you, but anyway. Yeah. So anyway, as far as that idea that the Shantideva says, if you don't exchange self and others, not only will you not be able to achieve enlightenment, but you won't even find any happiness while you're in samsara. Maybe he meant exactly that. I mean, even though it looks like you've got those two ways of meditating on bodhicitta, but how could you achieve enlightenment if you haven't exchanged self and others? Do you think there's somebody who's achieved enlightenment, some Buddha somewhere, or type of Buddha that hasn't exchanged self and others, that's still selfish? That's a bit of a joke, isn't it? So yeah, so that bit must be true. Without exchanging self and others, no way of achieving enlightenment. And also no possibility of happiness in samsara. Maybe that's also true, because as long as you're selfish, as long as you're mainly you're concerned about yourself, how do you get to create the karma to experience happiness in cyclic existence? As long as you're selfish, mainly concerned with yourself, not so caring so much about others, main thing is me. On that basis, how do you create positive karma, merit? Anyway, so I don't know. This things that are quite important to understand, I think. Try to figure out. Anyway, so yeah, so from just above in this text, so page 211. So this is the section where he talks about actually how to meditate on exchange yourself and others, right? However, he says there's 2 points. He said that, first of all, there are some obstacles you have to get out of the way, and then the actual way to meditate. So with the removing obstacles, first of all, he actually talks about, just exactly what this mind of exchanging self and others is. So that was that paragraph that we looked at the last time we were together, where it says removing obstacles, what is called exchanging oneself and others, and so on. So that he talks about some certain things that isn't the mind of exchanging self and others, and then basically the conclusion is the mind of exchanging self and others is the one that is the mind where you've switched the attitude from selfishness to caring for others. Basically, the way it's usually put is, instead of being cherishing myself and neglecting others, then you cherish others and then neglect yourself. And that's, okay, so we talked about that, this whole idea of neglecting. And there's one thing that's very interesting, I think, for us. So when what we've been doing up until now, if we keep doing the self-cherishing, if we carry on being selfish, then that will not bring all kinds of happiness to others, by the way. Unlike if you switch and your main focus is on others, then that brings all sorts of happiness for yourself, by the way. Right? You see what I mean? Selfishness doesn't bring happiness to others, by the way. Caring for others does bring happiness for yourself, by the way. So even though we say switch the attitude by considering others most important, cherishing them the most, and then neglecting oneself, but actually by putting others first, then by the way, you achieve all kinds of happiness. And in fact, you're the one that benefits the most from that switch. Because up until now, by following the, selfishness, but this is where we are, still suffering. Okay, so yeah, so that's what happened. It didn't bring it brought nothing but suffering for ourselves, and actually nothing but suffering for others by not having yet switched. Whereas when you switch, then you experience so much happiness. You're the one that actually benefits the most. You're the one that gradually becomes the bodhisattva and the enlightened being. Actually, you're the one that gains the most. You're putting others first, but you're the one that gains the most out of it. So you don't need to worry about the neglect. Have to think about what that means. It's not like, and it could start off in a sort of like a sneaky, selfish way where you're thinking, okay, given that by exchanging self and others, I would be really happy, therefore I'm going to exchange self and others. That would be a little bit like sneaky, selfish motivation for exchanging self and others, wouldn't it? So that's not the way it works. And actually, maybe that's what Lama Atisha meant. This is something that should be coming today, but because I keep talking about all sorts of other things, then not getting there. But anyway, Lama Atisha says, as His Holiness says, rather sarcastically. Where is it? Oh yeah. So this is actually on page 213. Lama Atisha said, so I'm changing a bit because I don't really agree with the way that he's translated it. Tibetans know bodhisattvas who do not know how to train in love and compassion. In other words, oh, you Tibetans, you've got bodhisattvas who never meditated on love and compassion. So in other words, they're not real bodhisattvas. So now why did I say that? I was because of what we were just looking at anyway. So yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. Now I remember what I was trying to make. So deciding you're going to exchange self and others for the selfish reason that you yourself want to achieve enlightenment, so you'll be nice and happy. That would be the kind of bodhicitta which isn't actually bodhicitta, and which is not one that has been reached through going through all of the necessary steps. And that's also something that comes up. Some other Tibetan lamas made this point. Anyway, yeah, let's keep going. Okay, so I'm going to start reading through this. Yeah, one thing that's, but I've got to say something else. One thing that I think is not very clear here. So usually when we're talking about meditating on bodhicitta through equalizing, exchanging self and others, it sounds like there's just the two things, right? Equalizing self and others, exchanging self and others. Actually, so Lama Tsongkhapa, I mean, his teachings are the basis for everything we know. But anyway, usually they talk about 5 points to meditate on, and there's also an order here too. So first of all, you meditate on equalizing self and others. So equalizing self and others means recognizing that all sentient beings are the same as oneself in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. And I've always thought it's the most amazing thing, because, if you don't go any further, just having that understanding in your life, I mean, that would completely change everything, wouldn't it? That's going to completely change everything. Anyway, so equalizing self and others. Then thinking in many ways about the drawbacks, the faults of self-cherishing, selfishness. And then next, thinking about all of the good things that come from cherishing others. Then exchanging self and others. And then the Donglen, taking and giving, the taking and giving meditation. Usually there are those 5 things to meditate on. And so when we go through this with Lama Tsongkham's explanation, we'll see how everything that he says fits into that. When he starts talking about how to do the meditation, we'll see how it all fits into that. Okay, so carrying on with the text. Actually, I think at this point it'd be good to take a couple of minutes to reflect a bit on, what we've been saying so far. So we'll read the text a bit. When training in this mind, so it means to train the mind in exchange yourself and others. When training in this mind, there are 2 obstacles. So here's the first one. So here's one obstacle. We separate oneself and others, which are the basis of one's own happiness and one's own and others' happiness and suffering, into 2 distinct natures like blue and yellow, and hold them to be established in that way, to exist in that way. So this makes, you might have got this straight away. For me, it took I certainly didn't get it straight away. It's sort, for me, it makes it makes more sense when you've read ahead a bit. Yeah, because So what he's saying here is a problem for somebody who wants to exchange self and others is having this idea that when we say self and others, it's like the way we think about blue and yellow. So I mean, what's that supposed to mean? Well, so it's coming up. Then with respect to the happiness and suffering based on them, we think, well, since it is mine, it should be accomplished or removed. In other words, because it's my happiness, it should be accomplished. Because my suffering should be removed. Since it's somebody else's, it is to be neglected. The happiness of others doesn't matter. The suffering of others doesn't matter. In my case, it matters. In their case, it doesn't matter. Because we've got this attitude like blue and yellow. But still doesn't quite make sense. Therefore, the antidote to this is to think that myself and others are not distinct entities by nature. Rather, as we look at one another, the mind other arises in me, whereas the mind I arises in the other person. So and actually even more clear. That point is made more clear. So it's like the mountain over here and the mountain over there. Well, of course, first time through, you're thinking, what? So he's going to go a bit more into it. For instance, although from this perspective, the mountain over there arises with respect to the mountain over there. So you might think it's redundant. But the point is, look over you're over here, and you look over there, and you see a mountain. You'll say that mountain. The mountain that you're looking at over there, you'll think that mountain. The one you're standing on, you think this mountain. But it's relative. It's just a matter of perspective. Yeah. So therefore, for instance, although from this perspective, the mountain over there arises with respect to the mountain over there. When you go over there, that mountain that you were saying is that mountain. When you go over there, then you say this mountain, and the one that you're on, you call that mountain. And the funny thing is that you can't be on this mountain and that mountain at the same time. Or maybe that's not the point. But anyway, when you think this mountain, that's quite valid. It's quite valid, but it's also relative. Because when you go over there, then you'll be saying this mountain about the mountain you were calling that mountain, which was also okay, and now you're calling it this mountain. That's also okay, because it just depends on your perspective. Yeah, it's a bit like, so I'm sitting here looking at this wall, so this wall is in front of me. If I turn around, then it would be behind me. Both of them would be right, wouldn't they? And where I'm sitting now, if I say this is the wall behind me, that'd be, although of course with the world being round, maybe that wall is also behind me. I don't know. Therefore, this is not the same as the fact that a mind of blue will arise in whoever looks at the color blue, and a mind of another color will not arise. So the thing about the comparison with the blue and yellow is more clear now. So with this mountain, that mountain, you can see how it's just a question of perspective. But blue and yellow, I mean, whether you're in front of it or behind it, or whether it's over here, over there, it's still going to be blue and it's still going to be yellow, isn't it? So what the Lama Tsongkhapa is saying is, we have a mind thinking self and other, me and others, I and others, which doesn't take into account that there's something relative about that. So relative, over here, I'm saying I and saying other to everybody else, but also everybody else is thinking I. Each one of you, or your whole life has been thinking I, which is completely valid. But so what he's saying is, don't make this mistake of thinking there's something ultimate about that. It's just like this mountain and that mountain. From this perspective, then I'm going to say I. But from your perspective, you're going to say I also. And both of them are valid. So it's relative, right? And I think what helps to get further into that idea and the significance is kind of, I think this is what I mean, sort of imagine yourself as the other person. Imagine yourself as the other person, thinking I about themselves, and then thinking he or she, about about yourself. That helps a bit to get into it. So anyway, I think it helps a bit, doesn't it? It does something quite strange in a way, doesn't it? That one. I'm thinking I about me. I mean, that's the only way I can think of saying it, right? So I'm thinking I about me. I'm thinking you about everybody else that I can see on the screen. But you're thinking I about yourself. Here's me thinking you, but you're thinking I. And you're thinking about me, you're thinking him. So anyway, yeah, it's quite helpful, quite interesting. So that's what he means about the green and the we normally have the attitude like blue and yellow. Right. Okay. So I think you're good to think about that a minute or two. So actually then next is a scriptural source for this idea. In this manner, the compendium of trainings, so that must be the compendium of trainings also by Shantideva, also teaches that self and other are not inherently established, but merely posited independence on the following point of view. So through familiarity with the equality of other and self, bodhicitta grows firm. Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? Because this is meant to be about exchanging self and others. But actually now he's talking about the equality of self and others. Okay, so actually what this it does make sense because, well, because I was saying, you've got those 5 steps. First of all, equalizing, and then exchanging comes later. So in order to be able to exchange self and others, it makes a huge difference if you've been able to see the equality of self and others. So that's why he's dealing with that now, that first. So yeah, through familiarity with the equality of others and self, bodhicitta grows firm. Yeah, so the stronger you have a sense of the equality of self and others, the more firm your bodhicitta is going to be. Self and other are relational, in other words, they're relative, and just as false as that side and this side. When he says false, what he means is, thinking that side and this side are fixed. That's something completely false. So self and others, self and others is false in that way. Then the slope is not that side by itself, in and of itself. Depending upon the perspective, it's this side. So depending upon where you are, it's going to be either this side or that side. So the self in itself is also not established, in and of itself. Depending upon the perspective, it's other. So in other words, Lama Tsongkhapa explains it, and then he shows us that this is actually, the source for this idea is Shantideva in his compendium of trainings. So this is quite powerful stuff, I think. Yeah, it really is. It's amazing. Just nothing else. Just equalizing self and others. Completely life-changing, I think, really. You don't have to be anything. You can be a Buddhist, you can be a Christian, you can be a Muslim, you can be an anarchist, you can be an agnostic, you can be anything you like. But this, somehow there's some kind of like reality in this that just is it's kind of life-changing. So then there's another obstacle that Lama Tsongkhapa talks about. So anyway, according to Chijang Rinpoche, so he says this is where we have the second obstacle. Remember above it says there were two obstacles, so here's the next one. This is also quite interesting, actually. So you have to remove the obstacle thinking, since the suffering of others does not harm me, I need not make an effort to remove it. There's no need for me to make an effort to remove it. If this were the case, then there are several sort of like absurd consequences. If this were the case, number one, there would be no need to accumulate wealth when young out of concern for the suffering of old age, since the sufferings of the elderly person would not harm the youth. Which is true, isn't it? Yeah. The suffering that you're going to experience in the future doesn't harm you, today's you. And yet we work to, to pay for a good, what's your old age pension and all that stuff, so that person whose happiness you're not going to experience, today's you, whose problems, if you don't do that work, don't affect you, but you still do it because even though the you of now isn't going to be affected one way or the other, still we do it. I mean, why do we do it? Somehow we have some kind of understanding about it, don't we? Also, it would be also like the hand. The hand would likewise not eliminate the suffering of the foot because they are other. So I know this one I'm not quite so sure about. Okay, so in general, it's true, so if your foot's hurting, why would your hand do something to ease the pain? The hand is not affected by it. So why would it do anything? I mean, in a way, it's something to think about. In a way, this also, if the foot has got a thorn in it, and the hand doesn't do anything to pull the thorn out, you could end up with sepsis. And then the hand would definitely be affected, because that can kill you, right? But that, in fact, that is the thinking, isn't it? So it's like, well, you know, why is my hand going to take the thorn out? The hand's not hurting. It's the foot that's hurting. But still, because we have the wisdom that can see the point, we do it. So it's the same, really, you know. So also, you know, it's a kind of superficial, on a superficial level, it is true that, you know, you're suffering. I don't experience your suffering, and I don't experience your happiness. So why would I bother to, you know, do anything to, you know, like increase the one and decrease the other? Actually, when you think a little bit deeper, even without talking about enlightenment, I mean, it's just better if everybody is happy and has everything they need. Life is just better for everybody. If you're all doing okay, then that's good for me as well. You know, if everybody in the world is okay, comfortable, has everything they need, that's going to help me, isn't it? Somehow we know that. Then, now that this, okay, so then this is gets a bit more difficult, I think. Someone might think, oh no, wait a minute, didn't finish that paragraph. This is a mere illustration and should be applied to the sufferings of the morning and those of the evening, and so on. So that in other words, the thing about you doing something for old age. Yeah. So children tend to have less wisdom, so therefore they need to be kind of forced to study so that they will be able to, you know, earn a good living and be happy later on. So it seems, doesn't it? But anyway, you know, that's the way of thinking of a child, isn't it? Don't think about the future, just think about now. A present pleasure, just playing around. I bet we all remember that, don't we? Come home from school and rather than doing homework, just go out and, you know, kick a ball around. But, you know, it's quite difficult to persuade yourself to do homework. Anyway, someone might think self and other are not the same as these, since the elderly person and the youth are in the same continuum, which is true, isn't it? They are in the same continuum. Somehow we know that, and therefore we do work now for our future. Self and other are not like that. You know, self and other are not part of the same continuum. Like, you know, like you've got self right now, but then gradually it's going to become other. It's not like that, is it? It's completely different. And then the hand and the foot are part of the same collection, you know, the collection of parts of the body. They all belong to the same collection of parts of the body, don't they? So it's different. So then Lama Tsongkhapa's replies, so a continuum and a collection are imputed to many instants and a combination of many parts. Okay, so the continuum or continuity, that's made up of many moments. And then a collection is made up of many parts. So they don't have any, they lack an autonomous nature. Since your own self and the self of others must be posited on a continuum of collection, self and other are not inherently established apart from mere relation. I don't really get that. Yeah, I was looking at this earlier, still doesn't quite work for me. Anyway, so maybe you just think about that. Then the next thing is, he says, okay, so not inherently established apart from mere relation, yet your own suffering is unbearable owing to the power of familiarization with self-cherishing from beginningless time. Therefore, if you familiarize yourself with cherishing others, their suffering will also become unbearable. You have to think quite deeply about this, I think. I mean, you might just get it on an intellectual level immediately, but really thinking about this, I think, why, I don't know, like your hand gets burned or broken, the bone gets broken, and there's the pain. So there's the pain, so that's there, it exists, it's there. Then, why we find it unbearable. Isn't he saying it's because of like this beginningless, selfish, self-cherishing attitude? If you're experiencing it, doesn't bother me so much. I'm experiencing is me, my hand, and my pain. Your own suffering is unbearable. Why do you find it unbearable? Because of having such a strong habit of self-cherishing, one that has become that one has had since the beginning of this time. So it's been like, like a habit that you've been that you've had since the beginning of this time. Of course, it can be very strong, very deep rooted one, isn't it? But still, it's just a question of habituating oneself. So if you get into the habit of thinking about the suffering of others and finding it unbearable, you'll end up finding it as unbearable, the suffering of others as unbearable as now we find our own suffering unbearable. Say that. Make sense? Okay, good. Now, the actual way to meditate. So he was talking about obstacles and then the actual way to meditate. Meditate on what? Meditate on exchanging oneself and others. By the power of attachment to the self, this self-cherishing has produced much that is undesirable, all sorts of things that are undesirable, all sorts of things that we didn't like from beginningless time up to now. I don't know, attachment to oneself, self-cherishing. I'm not sure there's so much difference, but anyway, self-cherishing has produced all sorts of unpleasant things for us since beginningless time up to now. So that's all it's done. That's why they call it what do you call it? Chongne. What do you call that? A chronic illness. It's a chronic illness. That self-cherishing mind. Always thinking me, oneself, the most important one. Despite the fact that you have always wanted to create excellent things for oneself, you have relied on an unsuitable means. In other words, you've relied upon a method for getting all sorts of wonderful things, which is not the right method for getting those things. In other words, selfishness. So what does that mean? You're like, so selfishness, like, so putting yourself first, neglecting others. So that means quite finding it quite easy to think that it's okay to uh, to use others for your own purpose, to cheat others. to steal from others. I mean, maybe that's not the kind of thing that we do, but that's still, we have that self-cherishing, and that's what that self-cherishing can do. And I often think, a lot of our sort of it's almost like our ethics are very much dependent upon it's almost like a luxury. I think I remember saying this before. It's like a luxury. In other words, because we have everything we need, it's quite easy to be ethical. But when when there's when you're in real difficulties, it's not so easy to be ethical. It's a bit of a test for your ethics, for your morality. And in fact, I think this one's a really good one. You're like, what you're going to do when there's just one loaf of bread left on the shelf, when you go shopping, when there's just one loaf of bread left. I think then you discover where your ethics are. And I hope, we'll pass the test, but, it would be a challenge, wouldn't it? So do you see what I mean? That's the point I'm trying to make. It's we might feel that we are quite ethical and we don't, use people and steal and so on and like that. But that's because we have everything we need. If we didn't have everything we need, then what would we do? Yeah. So we have relied on the something which won't bring happiness in order to bring happiness. It just doesn't work. Thinking, so contemplating, I don't know about contemplating, considering, thinking of your own welfare as being paramount, as being the most important thing. So owing to this, neither your own welfare nor that of others has been accomplished, despite the passing of countless eons. So that's the point. You see, since beginningless lifetime, so I mean that's already kind of like mind-boggling. The only thing that we've been doing is selfishness, and that didn't bring happiness for others, and it didn't bring happiness for ourselves. Like I say, it not only doesn't bring happiness for oneself and then happiness for others by the way, it doesn't even bring happiness for yourself. So it's amazing, isn't it? It seems so obvious that putting yourself first is what's going to get what you want. But actually, it's the complete opposite. Amazing, really. So not only have you failed to accomplish that, anything good for yourself or others, you have only been tormented by suffering. If you had shifted the concern for your own welfare to that of others, you would have become a Buddha a very long time ago, and both your own and others' welfare would have become excellent without a doubt. But since you did not do that, the time has been spent in meaningless exertion. We've worked very hard since the beginning of this lifetime, but because our method was completely distorted selfishness, we got nothing. Then, okay, so there's this sentence here. It's a bit. Anyway, I thought this is my version of it. So now, having understood this, so this is what he's advising us to think. Now, having understood this, I shall make many efforts, and this is what I was talking about at the beginning. It's a bit of a sort of awkward or funny expression in English to say, many efforts. You would usually say a lot of effort. I will make great effort. I'll make a lot of anyway. So the point is many efforts. It says in the text many efforts. In other words, not going to make effort just the once, but many times. I mean, I'm going to keep making an effort. In other words, is what it means. I shall keep making the effort by relying on mindfulness and vigilance to not allow this self-cherishing mind, which is my worst enemy, so where it hasn't come up, not allowing it to come up. And when it does come up, not allowing it to remain for long. That's what he says. That's what he's advising. Having seen that the self-cherishing mind is something we have always done and which never brought the happiness that we thought it would bring us, never brought happiness for ourselves, never brought happiness for others, only brought suffering for ourselves, is therefore our real enemy. It's the main enemy, it's the real enemy. External enemies are not the real enemy. The real enemy, the one that does need to be destroyed actually, is the self-cherishing mind. So from now on, having seen all that, from now on, I will do everything I can all the time to stop it arising. Like we talk about, stop getting angry, stop, like grasping. So, stop it from arising. And if I see that it has arisen, then I shouldn't let it last for long. Okay. Then he goes on to say, having made this certainty firm, then familiarize yourself with it many times. In other words, once you become very clear with that, it's something you need to when it says familiarize yourself, it means just do that meditation again and again and again, so that it'll get deeper and deeper and deeper. It'll become really something. Instead of being superficial, it'll become really deep and a real part of you. But then, besides that, by thinking about the benefits of cherishing others again and again in this way, then generate a strong enthusiasm to cherish others from the depths of one's heart. Then, sort of in a way which reflects, or is sort of like similar to before, with the self-cherishing. Now, instead of not allowing it to arise with the other cherishing mind, you make it arise as much as possible. In fact, the way he puts it is, then, having seen how amazing it is to put others first, do not generate new mental states that are neglectful of others, and any time that they do arise, don't let them last long. By giving rise to whatever degree you can to the thought that others are dear, pleasant, and likable, generate the mind cherishing others just as you previously cherished yourself. Dear, pleasant, and likable. This likable came up before, seeing all the sentient beings in the aspect of being likable, which I think is a little bit kind of like insipid or something. That's the word. A little bit weak. It's not likable. It's to do, have by having developed your mind so that how other sentient beings appear to you is like the apple of your eye. I think I mentioned that before. So everybody just, like whichever sentient being you see, it sort of like brings this warmth into your heart. Meditate on that, again and again. So, so by giving rise to whatever degree you can to the thought that others are dear, pleasant, and likable, very like the apple of your eye, generate the mind cherishing others just as you previously cherished yourself. Then we have these things from the earlier masters. First of all, Atisha. So I mentioned this before. Atisha, who was an Indian master, of course. But anyway, he's very important for Buddhism in Tibet. Spent many years in Tibet. Yeah. So before he came, I guess he was able to get some predictions about or advice from Tara. And so I think this is how it goes anyway. So she told him that if he went to Tibet, he'd been invited, so if he went to Tibet, then this would take many years of his life, but it would be really extremely helpful for the sentient beings. So he went. Yeah, I know. I forget the years. Somewhere around the 10th century or something. I can't remember. Somewhere around then, I think. So anyway, so Lama Tsongkhapa said, not Lama Tsongkhapa, Lama Atisha said, the Tibetans know bodhisattvas who do not know how to train in love and compassion. So what should one do? He asked. So rhetorically asked the question, and his answer was, train sequentially from the beginning. So Lama Tsongkhapa doesn't explain what that means, but I think what it means is just like with so it's cause and effect. So you don't get the effect without the cause, and so like with the seven cause and effect instruction, by working on the first one, that serves as a sort of foundation for success when you meditate on the second one, so on like that. They're linked like that. So also train sequentially from the beginning, equalizing yourself and others, thinking about the terrible, drawbacks of cherishing oneself, being selfish, then the benefits of cherishing others, then exchanging self and others, and then the Donglen. He doesn't mention about Donglen, taking giving. I don't think he mentions it at all. But we will, we'll definitely talk about that maybe next time. So that's what Lama Atisha said. And then Langri said, so I think this is in the Lamrim Chenmo as well, the great exposition of the Sage of Path. There's quite it's some sort of Tibetan idiom, I guess. So Langri said, Shawopa, I don't know who that is. I mean, maybe it's a student of his or a friend of his, I don't know. Shawopa and I have 18 human methods and 1 horse method, 19 altogether. I've got no idea what that's supposed to mean. But anyway, there's a bit of an explanation about what it's supposed to mean. The human methods are to generate the mind set on supreme enlightenment and train in doing whatever one does for the welfare of sentient beings. So those are the 18 human methods, and I'm pretty sure there isn't a list of 18 things that he used to do somewhere. I think it's just an expression. I don't know. Then, as for the horse method, since it is our self-cherishing that prevents, so there's something missing here, got missed out in the translation. Since it is our self-cherishing that prevents the bodhicitta that hasn't arisen from arising, and any bodhicitta that we have generated, it prevents it from remaining and increasing, we adopt a sideways stance like a warrior, and then confront it and train in whatever we can to harm it. So this is all very old Tibetan, and it's quite difficult to work out really what it means. And I do know that in another, I don't know if it was another translation or another, but from one of my teachers, I'm not quite sure. But instead of a sideways stance, it was like I will show them the side of my hand. To show your self-judging mind the side of your hand. And so this makes more sense when you look with the rest of this paragraph. With sentient beings, cherish them and train in whatever we can to help them. And actually, he left something out there which is, what is it? Anyway, where he says cherish, the text says, I will show them the palm. The palm, as in the palm of one's hand. So, I mean, maybe this is not exactly what we would normally do to signify helping and harming, but you've seen people doing this, like when you want to show somebody they're in trouble, the side of one's hand. It means like you're in trouble. So you're going to show the side of the hand to the self-cherishing mind. And then you're going to extend that, like the hand of help to the sentient beings. So I think that's what it means anyway. But it's okay, a sideways stance like a warrior. Yeah, that's good. I mean, you have to confront it and train and so on to harm it. But because it actually says, not to cherish, but to, show the palm. Show the palm. It makes sense to me that the sideways stance, really what it means is, showing the side of one's hand and then showing the palm. So I want to finish off this bit. There's just a bit more to read. Okay, so Kumlungpa, so this was actually Tibetan from before Lama Tsongkhapa, anyway, after Atisha. So since we act deviously, Geshe Jampa Gyatso, in his commentary, he says, he explains this as meaning not caring for the sentient beings. So since we don't care for the precious sentient beings, they will also do the same to us. In other words, what he's saying is Kamlungpa. What he's saying is it's just cause and effect. If that's how you treat them, that's how they're going to treat you. So if you if you don't care for them, they're also not going to care for you. Just cause and effect. Then finally, so we need to constantly check to what extent this mind has been generated, because everything stems from it. Everything comes out of this. Whether the root of the Mahayana has been planted or not, and whether one is concluded in the Mahayanas or not. In other words, whether you're going to become a Bodhisattva or not, which means, whether you're going to achieve enlightenment or not, depends on this point, being able to, gradually get rid of, wear down, completely dispel, get rid of the self-cherishing mind, and like nourish and grow and increase the power of caring for others. So then, in this way, if it does arise, that's excellent. But if it does not arise, then don't just leave it at that, but rely upon a virtuous friend who teaches it. So, if you try doing it, maybe he's talking about, if you try doing it by yourself and it's just not working, find a teacher who will be able to teach it to you. Then also always keep company with companions who are also training their minds like that. Those are the ones to hang out with. Read the scriptures and their commentaries, which are about this, which teach about this, which explain this. Then also, besides that, not just that, as its cause, accumulate the collections. So in other words, create merit and purify obstructions. In other words, purify your mind. Do purification practices. Accumulate merit and purify. Since it is certain, if you train your mind in this way, the seed will be fully planted. These actions, and so because of that, then these actions, therefore, these actions are of no little importance and a reason for joy. So, in other words, we have every reason to put ourselves into these practices of the meditation, purification, accumulating merit, and so on, studying, learning with great joy, because they really are of no little importance. It is, as a teacher said in his concise method for accomplishing the Mahayana path. No, I've never heard of that. Of course, there are lots of things I haven't heard of. For those who wish to enter the gate of the Mahayana Dharma, the Mahayana path, it's worth an eon, actually, it could be eons. It's worth eons of effort to generate bodhicitta, which are like the sun and moon, eliminating darkness and pacifying the scorching heat, torment of scorching heat. So in other words, this is, something to really keep in mind, bodhicitta is so amazing that even if it takes you eons, even if it takes you an eon of effort to, generate that mind, that precious mind, it's completely worth it. Okay, so it's getting a bit late, and so let's just dedicate all the merit from spending this time together this morning, this evening, as well as all of the merits of the past, present, and future, oneself and others, including all the bodhisattvas, including all the enlightened beings, dedicating all of that for all sentient beings to find peace and joy and happiness, free of all suffering, to meet with and be inseparable from perfect guides, gurus, like His Holiness Dalai Lama, Venerable Rinpoche, and so forth, so they'll be able to practice the path that leads to such happiness and peace. For the gurus to have long lives and all of their wishes to be fulfilled, for the success of the FPMT, and especially Land of Medicine Buddha, and for the quick return of Venerable Rinpoche. So think all of the merit we dedicated is like a dream, appears to have such solid, concrete existence, but actually it's completely empty of existing in that way. What we dedicated to also, like that, is like a dream, like an illusion. Isn't a dream, isn't an illusion, but like one. Things just aren't the way, don't exist the way they appear. And also ourselves and the dedication. Completely empty of existing as they appear. It's like a dream, like an illusion. Okay, so thank you very much, and see you next week.